Three, two, one. Hello, I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Live and Uncut podcast, where we talk frankly about issues of the day with leaders of the day. Today, I've got Jo Berry CBE with me today, daughter of Sir Anthony Berry, who was tragically killed in the Brighton bombings in 1984. Jo's been a peace campaigner. I'm not sure that's the right word, Jo, but that's the word I've got for over 40 years, having last year spent 7 trips to Belfast and actually met Patrick McGee, the man who was responsible for the Brighton bombings. Uh, Jo's charity is called Building Bridges for Peace, and if anybody has the ability to make a donation to that, that would be fantastic. Jo, welcome and congratulations on getting the CBE for the work you've done, the charity work, and getting it from Princess Anne at Windsor Castle must have been fantastic.
It was amazing. It was in January this year. It was a rainy day. And yeah, I was there with my three adult daughters, and the joy we all felt was extraordinary. I'm not someone who ever thought I would get any kind of honor. And I remember when I got the letter, I was like, what is a CBE? I had to Google it. I was like, I have no idea what this is. And then and then I was like, no, surely I don't deserve this. I got into like, why me? Anyway, I now accept it with like, yep, this is who I am, and I'm really grateful because of the doors it's going to open, and I'll make sure it's going to open doors.
Brilliant, Jo. Jo, will you give us a snapshot of your story, please?
Yeah, no, very happy to be with you all. So it's now over 41 years ago. My father was a Conservative MP, and he was attending the annual conference in Brighton. And I grew up, and some of you might have grown up with bombs going off from the IRA in London or in different places. I remember sometimes I couldn't get to school. But I lived in peacetime, it never occurred to me my dad would be a target. I saw it as kind of like their problem. And on October the 12th, a bomb went off and killed my father and four other people. Um, I remember the news that the bomb had gone off, and then we had to wait for, I don't know, maybe 8 hours before we heard that they found my dad's body and that my stepmother had been badly injured. And the first thing that we had to do, I was just 27, was go and pick up my half brother and half sister who were teenagers from their schools and tell them the news that their father was dead and their mother was injured, and then drive them back to London to be with their aunt. It was very public. It was headlines. The whole thing was like being in a kind of surreal nightmare. And I agreed for my dad, but I also I didn't want this to be the end of my understanding that life was something to be lived. I wanted it to be something positive. So 2 days later, I vowed to make a difference with this. I vowed to bring something peaceful out of it. I decided if I could understand those who killed my father, then I would somehow find a way to bring something positive. They were the most demonized terrorists we had at that time. This is 1984. The papers just described them as evil, and that wasn't enough for me. I was always interested in like why things happened. But I didn't have the how. How do you turn something like this into something positive? I had absolutely no idea at all. But somehow I trusted that life was going to bring me the experiences, and it did. And I had my first experience a few weeks later when I ended up sharing a taxi with a complete stranger, and I could tell from his accent he was from Northern Ireland. So we started a conversation, and I said, "Look, I'm planning to go to Northern Ireland. I want to understand why someone would choose to kill my father. Why are the IRA planting bombs? What's going on? Do you know?" And he looked at me and he said, "Actually, I do know, because my brother, he was in the IRA, and he was killed last year by a British soldier. So this is 84. This is the height of the conflict. We should have been enemies. My people killed his brother. His people killed my dad. And yet we spoke of a world where peace was possible." And I remember leaving that taxi and thinking, I can build a bridge across the divide. And even though no one knows, I know. And I felt like I started to make a difference. And that led me to travel to Northern Ireland in 85 and 86 and meet many people who shared their stories. I was very welcomed there especially by the Catholic community. I went to places where even my accent was such a threat, I had to be quiet. But there was something in me determined to humanize the other. But it was difficult going there. I had not dealt with my trauma. And it's only after the peace process that everything changed again. And in the meantime, every time a bomb went off, I felt their pain. Every time someone was killed with a gun, I felt, because I understood that pain. My heart was open to the pain of war, the pain of terrorism. And then I remember in June 99, after the peace process, after the Good Friday Agreement was signed, I turned on the TV for the news, and there was the only person who's ever been to prison for planting the bomb, Patrick McGee. He was walking free as he just came out as a free man. We were not prepared or told, and it was a shock. I remember thinking, like, well, it's okay for you. You got your life back. What about my dad? He can't come back. But then thinking this is for peace. This means less people will go through what I've gone through. And then the idea came to me, maybe I could meet him. And it took a year and a half of traveling to Northern Ireland, taking part in incredible workshops that happened post-peace process. I met people who were in the IRA, came out of prison, who but had sort of worked with him, been with him in prison. I met people who were mediators who said they could help arrange it. I just immersed myself in the post-conflict experience. And I kept on hearing back, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, Jo, for whatever reason, like just go away. No. But I was fiercely dependent and like, I really, really want to do this. So I carried on. And eventually someone said I can make this happen. And they did. And, the day was actually, he told me the day it was going to happen. I had no time to worry about it. It was a Friday morning and I was on my way back to Dublin to Glencree Reconciliation Centre. And I was told I could meet him on the way in Dublin at a friend's house. No one knew. And I was terrified. I remember thinking, all these years of not wanting to blame him and not see him as my enemy, how am I going to feel being with him? I was quite determined. All I wanted to do was see him as a human being. I didn't need him to apologize. I just needed him to show up. And he came, and this is now November 2000. He came in the room, and I remember looking at him and thinking, you don't look like a terrorist, whatever my idea of a terrorist was. And he started off speaking very quietly about the reasons why he joined the IRA. And the language he used was very much we. He was speaking for his community. He was speaking in terms of sort of a political righteousness, like this is our explanation. He didn't say we're freedom fighters, but that's what it felt like. We saw suffering in our community and we tried non-violence. It didn't work. And so violence then became on the agenda. And he explained to me, and I was familiar with that thinking. I'd met other men in the IRA, and I knew that was a lot of their thinking was that they didn't have the power, and the Conservative government had all the power, and they said they abused the power, and these people were the oppressed. And I remember at one point looking into his eyes and seeing that he was someone who he cared for his community. He thought deeply about joining the IRA when he was in prison. He got a PhD. He was a deep thinker, he was an intellectual, and that it was a response that he took because of what he saw in his community. And that humanized him enough for me to see that he's more than the man who killed my father. He's the man who, he has friends. He's a son, he's a father, he's a brother, he's a friend. He cared.
Jo, can I just ask you, when
Yeah.
you walked into that room to meet him, who said the first word? What actually happened at that point?
I said the first words. I thanked him for coming.
Okay. Okay. So you kicked it off.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did he respond to that?
He said, no, thank you for inviting me. So I remember very well. And then we talked about how he said, oh, I've heard a few times that you've wanted to meet me, and I've always said yes. And so we talked about how I was always hearing he didn't want to meet me. which was sort of interesting. So I call that our icebreaker.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
fantastic. Yeah.
and then we went to our own room after that at the back of the house, and then that's when the real dialogue happened.
And was that just you and him?
Yes, no one else there.
Okay. No,
I mean,
no.
when I do restorative justice and this breaks all the rules, it's like just you just don't do it like this. But it was the only way it was going to happen because no one wanted to facilitate it. I think because we're so high profile and so early on in the peace process.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Congratulations on doing that. That's just I'm kind of blown away by the fact you could do that. Anyway, I've interrupted your story, so please carry on. I think
No, that was
we're all
all welcome,
fascinated.
all welcome. And so I remember reaching a point where I thought, well, I got what I want from this meeting. He's now a human being. He's not just this faceless enemy. But it is difficult hearing him justify killing my father, who, still grieving, still feeling the loss. So I was going to end it, and my plan was to go, and no one would ever know I'd met him. Like that was my plan. I built the bridge and then gone. But that's when he changed, and he stopped talking and just looked at me, and he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, and he said, I don't know anymore who I am. Can I hear your anger? Can I hear your pain? What can I do for you? And I knew in that moment that he'd taken off this political hat and he stopped justifying. And he moved from talking about we to I. He became vulnerable. And he wanted to know about my dad. He asked questions. So before that, I'd been the one asking questions, but now he's asking questions. What kind of man was he? How was he? How were the rest of your family impacted? What happened? And he really wanted to know my story. And for most of us, it's hard to understand, but when he planted the bomb and it went off, he didn't care who was in the hotel. He didn't see the human beings who were in the hotel. He just saw legitimate target. Like he dehumanized everyone there. That's how he could plant the bomb and be happy when because he was happy it was successful, it went off. But now, for the first time, he's realizing that he killed a wonderful human being and that he's as guilty of dehumanizing the other as he's accusing the other of dehumanizing them. And that there's a cost to his humanity through using violence. So he arrived at that meeting with no problems. He was fine. You had righteousness on his side. And then he left with a huge problem, a huge challenge of really realizing the impact, and he's responsible for that. And he's seeing, I guess he's seeing like the values he sees in me, he's seeing the qualities in me must have come part from my father, and he's responsible for that.
Mhm.
And so I stayed because that was an incredible conversation. And we're now talking 3 hours of being together, just him and I. And I remember I reached a point where I can't do this anymore, because I'm listening to parts of me that are finding it difficult. And it was so intense. And I was really, really present to him. So I said I was going to go. And that's when he said, I'm really sorry I killed your dad. Now,
Wow.
I I didn't want that, but what I got from that was him seeing my dad for the first time. And that did mean something to me. And I said to him, the words just kind of spilled out, I'm so glad it's you. And then I left. And we actually met 3 weeks later. And his first question was, what do you mean by I'm so glad it's you? I can't stop thinking about that.
Mhm.
And I said, I think I meant your preparedness to open up and to really see my dad and to feel the impact. I didn't think that was going to happen. And I don't think many men would have had the courage to take that step. And I'm seeing him next Wednesday in Belfast. And we've been through a lot together, but I still feel that about him. Like it's been frustrating, it's been difficult. I've sometimes still have had enough. I've been irritated. But beyond all that, there's a real sense of his courage, and I met him not to change him, but to change myself. And I've been transformed through this process of being in dialogue with him. And I still am. I'm learning so much about myself, however annoying it can be sometimes and
Mhm.
difficult, because It's like a perfect teacher for me because I don't want to blame him. I want to move into a place where I can empathize with him. He later said that he was disarmed by my empathy.
Mm.
If I'd gone in there ranting and raging, I'm right, you're wrong, he would have stayed in a very safe place of justification. And this is a man who was one of the best bomb makers the IRA had like massive walls around him, complete control. And yet it was empathy that disarmed those walls. And at that time I didn't have great confidence. I was going through a lot in my personal life. And yet the power of really listening to him and acknowledging him and hearing him was enough to disarm him.
Jo, can I ask you how your three daughters felt about this?
Uh, what now or then?
Then, about mum going to meet
Well,
this.
yeah, they wouldn't have known the first time
Okay.
because no one knew. And then the second time I went, I did tell my daughters, especially the two oldest. I was the kind of mother that did share a lot with them. And the middle one was she listened to me, and then she went and I think it was the next day, she went and packed her suitcase and came down the stairs with her pink suitcase and said, okay, mum, I'm coming with you. And she's like 6. I was like, okay, thinking, how am I going to get out of this one? Because she's certainly not coming. And I said, well, what is it you want to come for? I've got a message for that man, she said. She, at 6, she was, very forceful young little girl. She still is now. I said, okay, what is it? Maybe I can let him know. I want him to know. I want to tell him it was a very bad thing he did to kill my granddad, Tony. I said, okay, that's absolutely fine. How would it be if I wrote it down and then I shared it with him? And she thought about it and she said, okay, you can do that. And she put the suitcase down and went to play. And that bit is actually on film. There was a documentary a year later, and I actually shared that on camera. It was at the second meeting. And you can see that he is emotionally affected by it because it's the first time he now realized, oh my, it's not just Jo, it's daughters. Who else is it? Beginning to see
Mm.
the impact. And she had many more messages as well. And she's now 33 on Friday. She doesn't want to meet him. And yet she's had a big part to play as a child. And she's angry. She's angry that she never got to meet her granddad. And I absolutely celebrate that. That's her
Mm.
right. But she has met other men in the IRA and she's been to Belfast to do projects. So she's on her journey. We're all on our own journeys with this.
Mm. Wow. So I saw on the internet or on YouTube you on a video with Patrick McGee in a wonderful place in Switzerland called I think it's called, where there's a centre for peace
Yep.
and reconciliation in a big old hotel, I think. What were you doing there?
Yes, yes. And we were there at a conference. I mean, we have spoken together over 300, 400 times. We've traveled together to Rwanda, to Lebanon, to Israel and Palestine. We've been all over Europe. We tried to go to Mexico, but the American government stopped him, so I had to go on my own. Um, but yeah, we Northern Ireland Republic. We've traveled many, many countries, and there are times when I'm on an airplane with him. He's sitting next to me, trying to teach me how to do cryptic crosswords because he's really good and I'm really bad at it. I look around the plane and think, if you all knew who this guy is, like why we're together, like, how would you feel? Like I almost shocks myself sometimes that we're traveling together. And I go to places where he's the only person I know, and he'll give me support because he knows sometimes I can be a bit hard on myself. So he's always there to remind me how well I've done.
Wow. Wow. I'm blown away by that. You didn't tell me that when we rehearsed this, and I'm amazed. Congratulations. Well done. Now, I stopped your story when I brought up the Switzerland issue. Where had we got to? Um,
We're now in the years of us together traveling, learning. So it's a great time for you to ask any questions because there's a lot I can share, but I'd love it to be, you or any other questions.
okay, well, let's start with your charity and the work you're doing, and how's it going? Because we are talking at a time when probably the world needs a bit more peace, doesn't it? Particularly what's happened over the last week or two. And in case you're watching this on YouTube, we are now on the 2nd of March, 2026, when and some extraordinary things are happening in the Middle East.
Yes, this is true. Oh, we are in really, really difficult times, and I, I don't believe war ever works. I don't believe violence ever works, I, and yeah, I can understand why people choose violence. But for me, the impact is too great. The cost is too great because my way is to see humanity in everyone, and I believe we can empathize with people in all the different countries in the world. And I refuse to take sides. I refuse to take sides in any conflict because there's many different narratives. But the way I was raised in history and from Northern Ireland was that like one side was right, one side was wrong. But I think the truth is when we really listen, and when I say listen, I mean like suspend our judgment, suspend the belief that, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, that's irrelevant because we haven't lived their lives. But when we really listen, empathize, then there's an understanding that actually I might have made the same choices they made or they're making right now. And we have the capacity to empathize with absolutely everyone. But what happens is that we close down on that and we choose
Mm.
some people we will listen to and see their humanity, some people we won't, and we create the othering, and the othering is the beginning to me of being able to use violence. Patrick, he now says that he couldn't kill my dad. Now he knows him as a real human being. Uh, but how can we, my question is, how can we change how we do conflict so we do see the humanity, and then like, we just wouldn't want to hurt people. And there are people really skilled like Derek and many other people around the world who are skilled in conflict transformation, negotiation. Like we have those experts, we have peace build, we have the people, but at the moment they're not the ones making the decisions. They don't have the resources. So my hope is one day it will shift, but right now we're still in the transition time where some people still think war is a good idea. So my heart breaks, my heart breaks on days like this because the pain is too much. Yes, Derek.
Going back to your expertise on Northern Ireland, and what came
Mm.
to mind was unconscious bias, that's been built up
Yeah,
families and in the DNA, which is very sad. How do you see? I mean, you've done some great work in Northern Ireland, but
yeah.
how do you see the religious conflicts in places like Londonderry or Derry being resolved?
Mm. Well, wherever I go, and I've worked a lot in schools in England, in London, in Northern Ireland, I always start by sharing my story. And when I share my story, even 15, 16-year-olds feel heard in the story. They feel they're in the story. Maybe it's the way I tell it, but they feel they're part of it. And then once that connection's made, then I take them on a journey. And I see so many examples of people having realizations about themselves, maybe that they can make a difference. Maybe their grievance doesn't have to be something that sets them back, but they can turn into being a positive change maker. Or I remember I was in school recently, and there's a girl from Ukraine whose father's still in Russia, and her best friend's father just been killed by Russian soldiers. And she she shared with me that she now wants to understand the Russian soldiers and hear their stories and realize that it's hard, but they must have their reasons, and maybe they didn't have a choice. And she was doing her own thinking. Now, I didn't say to her, I never would, never to anyone, you've got to humanize your other. That's not what this is about. I work with people, not to people. I'm creating a safe space for people to choose to grow or change or transform if they want to. And I have countless stories of young people speaking to me at the end saying that it's helped them do something in their lives. It's helped them see themselves differently. I remember I was in a youth group in Belfast, and this is like the most rundown youth group ever. Like the building was falling down. It was pain. And as I arrived there, I was told, Joe, they won't listen to you there. They're not those kind of kids. And I was like, okay, fine. Inside going, all right, thank you. Um, the young people didn't just listen to me there. I had spontaneous applause. And one of them shared about his story and like massive trauma, and I listened and I acknowledged, and it was just like, wow, the fact you're here showing up, it's amazing, just really, really validated him. I found out afterwards, this young man, he never speaks. So the youth worker said to him, what was it that made you want to open up? And he said, I felt safe. It was Joe. Just knew I was safe. And I
And
think that,
he didn't know you before that. He didn't know you before that.
no,
You
no,
just empathized with him the way you told the story.
yeah. And he knew he felt
Fantastic.
safe. Yeah.
Wow.
He knew he
Wow.
wasn't going to be judged or blamed. He just felt safe. Yeah. And that's, I think, what, because of the internal work I've done is create that emotional safety. I don't tell people, you're now entering into a safe zone. Because like that never is, and I'm always open to whatever's going to be in the room, and then what I can do is I'm a speaker but also facilitate, so I can then respond to what's in the room. So I might have a young person sharing like some amazingly difficult challenge they're going through, and then I can respond to that in a way that supports them in finding out the answers rather than me giving an answer. And then
Mm.
I kind of guide them along, And I went one room, one school, and it was in Tower Hamlets in London. And I was actually doing a 6 week course, which like to get into school for 6 weeks is incredible. And usually I'm lucky if I get half an hour or an hour. And this is before lockdown. And every one of those young people in the room had experienced racism. They were all Muslims, Muslim girls. And at first of all, they didn't really want to engage with me. It was Monday morning, 9 o'clock. After an hour of being with them, they were sitting on their desks going, and then Joe, they said this happened, and then this happened. And I had to ditch my agenda. And they wanted to tell me all the experiences of racism they'd had, all of them being told they were terrorists, being told this, that, and all their families. And we went from them, they were angry, they were outraged at what they were experiencing, which is absolutely understandable. Like I was like, I'm so sorry, people that look like me that are white have done this to you, it's not okay. Um, on the 6th week of being with them, they created projects to be positive change makers. They've even talked about how to challenge their teachers if they weren't going to listen without blaming, shaming them, making them wrong. They were incredible what they learned. A lot of them changed their university degrees after doing that course as well. I'd say it's a course. I very much made it up, like depending on how they were feeling, and then, but they were amazing, and I'm still in touch with some of them, and yeah, they were incredible. So, I mean, that's sort of how I like to work. And then, of course, if I'm with Patrick McGee, it's very different because then that's more we're present. We make it up. We tell our story, and then we respond to questions in the room.
So how does that work? You tell your story together, or you spend 20 minutes telling your story and then he tells his story? How does that work best? You must have tried it in all different ways.
Yeah, I usually go first, then he goes, then I go, then he goes, and then we open up for questions. So I think that sort of works best.
Right.
And then we answer, and we never know. We never know what we're going to be asked. So,
Mm,
and I think for people just to see us on the stage, doesn't matter what we say. It's just that we're
mm,
there listening to each other. Obviously, you can tell that we care about each other. It is enough for then people
mm,
to reflect on, well, what does that mean for me in my life?
mm. And just going back to the Muslim girls, how did you deal with that in the first day when they were angry? Did you just listen and let them go, or did you apply any input?
I listened. I listened, I acknowledged, I heard them. And I thought, I'm going to stay here as long as it takes because it's the most important thing to do. And they, some of the feedback was it was the first time that a white person had not just heard them, but seen them as amazing young people. And
Wow.
they hadn't had that before. That to me is what this is about.
Mm.
Oh, thank you, Nancy, clapping.
Joe, we're nearly out of time actually.
Oh,
Will you come back and share some of your stories and how you manage the conflict with us later on in the year, please? It's been absolutely fantastic. But in the tradition of Monday Night Live, will you leave us with one thought for 2026 for people watching this live or watching this on YouTube or on the Negotiators podcast, please?
Thank you. Whatever we're feeling today, and it's a difficult day, is understandable. And out of those feelings, whatever they are, desperation, feeling overwhelmed, helpless, we can turn that around and all be positive change makers. We can all reach out to someone, we can all have extra kindness, we can all listen to someone's story. When people are struggling, we can say, I'm here, please share with me. I care about you. And that itself means so much, because it needs all of us to be a positive change maker.
Wow, fantastic. And Jo, just tell us what your charity is. I think it's building bridges for peace. How do people get in touch with that, and how do they donate to the fabulous work you're doing?
Well, think you said the donate button's not working, but I'm going to try and change that. One of
No,
them
it
is
will be working. So it's the Building Bridges for
for
Peace website.
peace.org.
So if they
Yeah, and then
Google that or put it into ChatGPT, that will come up.
I've also got my Jo Berry website, which is more my sort of speaker website. If you ever want me to come and contribute, just let me know.
Yes, please. Yeah. Jo Berry CBE, thanks for joining Monday Night Live. And can I ask every member of Monday Night Live to thank you in the normal Monday Night Live way? That was a fantastic talk, and we've all got so much to learn from what you said. And you're a great storyteller, Jo. The emotions come through, and absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much, and good luck with all your work. Safe trip to Belfast tomorrow.
Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll see everybody next week on Monday Night Live. And if you like this video, please like it and please send it on to your friends. Jo Berry CBE.